Did you know the IRS just hired more than 50,000 new agents? Most of these agents specialize in collections that are mandated to audit small businesses and increase collections on individuals. IRS notices can be intimidating, but waiting to act could cost you your valuable taxpayer rights. Don't try to handle the IRS alone. These agents are trained to trap you into agreements designed to collect as much money as possible. Don't pay thousands of dollars to a marketing company claiming to be a tax resolution firm. Get behind the shield. The enrolled agents at Elite 8 Tax and Financial Services are experts at tax resolution, protecting taxpayers' rights, and are federally licensed to represent taxpayers before the IRS. Elite 8 Tax and Financial Services has the knowledge, skill, and experience to assist you with audit representation, liens, levies, offers and compromise, innocent spouse relief, wage garnishment, back taxes, and more. Don't lose sleep, time, or your rights as a taxpayer. Make your appointment today at elite8financial.com to schedule a consultation and get the IRS off your back. Get behind the shield.
This is Dr. Tamia Guest with Rejuvenating Chiropractic.
This is Nara Reed with Modified Nutrition Health Coach.
This is Karen Marcel with June Street Barbershop.
This is Tiffany Marcel with Marcel Luxury Realty, and you're listening to Boss Talk Radio.
She cute. Style, comfort, and confidence. Shop with the trend in mind. She cute. Get the latest styles in outerwear, tops, jumpsuits, hats, and accessories. She cute. Shop from the comfort of your own home with confidence and quality products, hassle-free exchange, and free shipping over $65. She cute. Visit us online at SheCuteBoutique.com to shop our new fall collection.
Welcome to Boss Talk Radio, the #1 online business and entrepreneurial talk show. Brought to you by Elite 8 Tax and Financial Services.
Boss Talk Radio, keeping it real, yeah, that's for sure. I said a Boss Talk Radio, here for your needs, we'll crack the code. He the boss.
He gon' fix your situation like there ain't no time for wasting. We ain't playing when we saying
he the boss.
And if you ever have a problem, he gon' show you how to solve it. Listen in and he'll show you he the boss.
Talk
Here's your host, the Texas tax expert, George Dandridge.
Talk Radio, here for your needs, we'll crack the code. He the boss.
What's good, family? Welcome to another episode of Boss Talk Radio. I'm excited for today's show. I have to tell you a little bit of background about how this one even came up, because this is that one. So a lot of you follow me on social media, and you know I can get kind of petty sometimes, but I've been learning so much stuff over the last couple of months, and it reminded me of something a family member told me a long time ago. One of my elders said, you can always tell where you're going by who God places in your life. So one of our guests today, chance meeting at a friend's house, and we just got to talking and chopping it up like brothers do and hit it off. And as I started to learn more about what he does, I was just interested in the concept. And so we had some dialogue, at different times. And I was just further and further marveled by it. And lo and behold, out of the blue, I get a phone call from one of my colleagues and friends asking me about being on a diversity, equity, inclusion task force for one of the associations we belong to. And I was like, clearly, you got the wrong number. You meant to call me. And this was my first lesson in true diversity, because her response was, yes, I meant to call you because we don't need any sugarcoating on this situation. We have to get the truth. So I'm just seeking truth tellers, regardless of your background or whatever. I was like, okay. So I immediately called. Jason was like, hey, dude, you'll never guess who got pegged for DEI. He was like, cool. I was like, yeah, I don't know about this one. So I dove deep. I tried to pick his brain for everything or whatever. And, interestingly enough, I coincidentally ran into our second guest. And if you were listening to one of our Elite 8 commercial at the top of the hour, that was actually her voice on there. I heard her doing a speech somewhere, and I was like, that voice, I got to use that one. That's it right there. And lo and behold, what I didn't know was her voice is like just a hidden talent thing that she didn't really do that. So when I got like to talking to her and found out her bio, she was like this engaging team leader that was responsible for corporate culture and all. So I was like, tell me more. And I learned these terms like microaggressions and, unconscious biases. And one day I got off the phone with her and I just sat there feeling kind of guilty, like, damn, I'm not that great of a person. I need to work on it. But anyway, so the topic today is diversity, equity, and inclusion. What that means, what does it serve? And I promise you by the end of today's show, not only are you going to learn some stuff about yourself, but how you interact with others. And then, of course, me being me, I'm going to push the envelope a little bit and see what we can uncover. So with that said, we're going to get into some of the terms of the week. So I wanted to start with setting the parameters, giving you guys an understanding that you may not have, because oftentimes we sling around terms and what it actually means gets lost in translation. So I wanted to see how I could unbiasedly deliver this. So I just looked it up. So diversity, the presence of differences within a given setting. Let that sink in for a moment, because you're going to have to get into that place to really take this walk with us. Equity, the process. And I think this is the part that we struggle with because this is where all the work lies. The process of ensuring that processes and programs are impartial, fair, and provide equal possible outcomes for every individual. This is where the work is right here, because this is where those microaggressions and those unconscious biases come into play. And then inclusion, the practice of ensuring that people feel a sense of belonging in the workplace. I want to challenge that narrative because I don't believe that you can, maybe, what's the word I want to use? Code switching. You are who you are, and I think that is important to show up as your authentic self, regardless if that's a good person, a bad person, whatever it is. People are, I'll speak for myself. It's easier for me to deal with your truth than, you buttoning up just for these couple of hours or whatever, because then we can never really, get to know each other or really have any type of genuine dialogue. So that was the framework that we wanted to put down there for you guys. And when we come back, we're going to introduce our guests and get into this conversation. If you are a business owner, here's what you need to do. First and foremost, share the video. Hashtag that thing DEI, unless you want to spell it out, diversity, equity, and inclusion. The next thing you need to do is hit your recorder, pull out your pen, your iPad, whatever it is you do that allows you to take notes, because you're going to have to watch this episode a couple of times, I promise you, because in this, you're going to discover some things about why there's certain clientele you can't reach. You're going to discover things about some of your hiring practices. I promise you, this is the one. So we'll be back right after this.
The U.S. government has given billions of dollars to businesses in an effort to curb the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The government will begin to pursue recouping these funds in 2021. Aggressive penalties will be imposed on companies that do not follow regulations and guidelines for proper use of these funds. Criminal charges are already being levied on fraudulent use. Don't suffer again. Get a customized business operations success suite from Elite 8 Tax and Financial Services for your company today. BOSS packages include entity formation, payroll, accounting and bookkeeping, tax planning, tax filings, and quarterly strategy sessions to minimize your tax liability, increase efficiency, and maximize your profits. Make your appointment today at elite8financial.com. Get the guidance, tools, and protection your business needs now. Get BOSS. Get behind the shield.
Your bags are packed and you're ready to enjoy a much-needed vacation. You arrive at the airport and you're delayed because you were unaware of new protocols. When you land, you're not sure who to use for reliable ground transportation. You arrive at your resort to find it doesn't look like the brochures and your accommodations aren't ready. You've just lost an entire day trying to get settled and you still have to find things to do while on vacation. Destinations and Occasions is your premier concierge travel and event planner. At D&O, every detail of your trip is vetted for quality to create a great client experience. We're even accessible while you're away to take care of any concerns that may arise. Call us today at 510-459-7732 to plan your next vacation. Or visit us on the web at destinationsandoccasions.com. Destinations and Occasions. Details is what we do.
Knowledge, integrity, security, service. Get behind the shield.
Life insurance, the most affordable, risk-free, wealth-building tool in history. Advances in life insurance allow you to plan for college, retirement, investing, unexpected living expenses, and has the power to change the outlook of the next generation. Experts say most Americans are underinsured or have outdated policies. Your life policies should be optimized every 5 years or whenever there is a major life event. Call 866-235-4838 or visit us online at elite8financial.com/life insurance to have the experts at Elite 8 Tax and Financial Services provide you a free quote or a free evaluation of your existing coverage. If you won't do it for you, do it for them. Get behind the shield.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Are you ready to get your education on? Welcome to the show, the doctor, Mr. Jason Lambert. How you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great, George. How are you?
I am amazing. Thank you so much for giving us of your time. When people hear your bio, they're going to appreciate you being on as well. And we also have on the show today, Miss Erica Forum. How you doing?
Hi, wonderful. How's everyone?
Doing amazing. So, Jason, let's go ahead and start with you because this is like your field of study, and you're one of the leading premier researchers in this area. So, give us some game.
All right. Well, it's a quick intro. So, I'm Jason Lambert. Thanks for having me on the show, by the way, George. I appreciate that. What you said earlier, that really resonated with me. The conversation about really not understanding DEI, because don't feel bad. There are a lot of folks out here who hear these words, these terms, like alphabet. Some people, call it mistakenly, and so it's quite normal. It happens all the time, and it's interesting that they called you up because sometimes, because we are maybe an employee of color, we're tapped to lead these diversity, equity, inclusion efforts and programs, even though that's not really our background or our expertise. So that in and of itself is a reason why it's great to unpack this understanding of what diversity, equity, inclusion is, because, they tapped you probably because oh, you're a Black person, you probably might know what's going on, right? But it's so much more to it than just our individual experience. But I got on a tangent there, and I might do that often throughout this conversation. But I am a business professor at a Southern State University. I also own a consulting company called Imagine Consulting, LLC, with my partner, Dr. Dayo Akinlade. And we also have an organization called Bizona.com. It matches underrepresented professionals and communities. And I guess what kind of got me on this journey as a business professor And conducting diversity, equity, inclusion research was my experience growing up. There's a term that people say that me search is also research. So me search is research, and that really fits the definition well for me. Growing up, working in different organizations, working for different nonprofit and city agencies, I saw this disparity in how resources were distributed across different neighborhoods based on race, identity, and things like that. And so I always question that. Why does this happen? Why is this a part of human behavior? We see these disparities, these unequal outcomes and distribution of resources. And so my one of my mentors, Myrtle Bell, she's written the book on diversity that's used in a lot of universities across the country. She was very helpful in helping me fine tune my lens to really understand DE&I. And specifically, I look at recruitment, I look at diversity climate. We look at ways how we can improve what we've coined as diversity climate change to better improve outcomes for organizations, for employees in those organizations, so they can have a better sense of belonging. And right now, I think we are at a very striking turning point in our history. This is one of the few moments where we've seen so much attention to this topic that many of us who have been the recipients of things like microaggressions that you alluded to earlier, or barriers to employment and differential treatment, we've known this all along. We've also known about things like in society outside of the workforce, with police brutality that's disproportionately occurs in communities of color, where we see many Black and brown men killed at gunpoint. And so it's good that we're having these conversations now, because now we're beginning to see some type of a bias training, even within the police department. We're beginning to track different incidents that occur, and organizations are beginning to do that too. And also they're beginning to put money behind what they say. So they're starting to walk their talk, if you will. But we still have a long way to go. And there's a lot of lip service from a lot of organizations as well. But I've always been an optimist because I think that, it's good to see the glass half full. Otherwise, we can spiral into some sort of depression or despair, and that's not going to help any of the outcomes. And so, my role is to just try and educate people, from all walks of life, all backgrounds, so that we can really be the best human beings we can in society and at work. So thanks for having me. I look forward to the rest of this conversation.
And Erica, tell us about some of your background in this specific area of conversation, and because you've been picked for several teams across organizations and responsible for developing a culture where there wasn't one. So give us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Absolutely. Thanks, George. So my name's Erica Ofram. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, which I'm sure we will talk about that in a moment, George. I know you and I had conversation about pronouns and some of the importance thereof. And I identify as an African-American woman here in America. To your point, which you said earlier, I've worked for numerous Fortune 500 organizations, specifically in the area of learning and development. So with that, it's about everything from, facilitation to curriculum design, to project management, you name it. And like many African-American professionals, usually we are picked for diversity initiatives without a lot of knowledge around that. Lucky for me, throughout my personal journey, I have participated in nonprofit organizations that specifically focused on that and eliminating or reducing the disparities amongst communities that include people of color. So I've had some education and background around that as well. But, I've also participated in organizations in leading their employee resource groups as well. I'm an educator at heart, a lifelong learner, as you can imagine, and I highly encourage everyone to constantly learn more about what each one of those elements of DEI includes, what it means, and then also take your own personal journey in helping uncover whatever those unconscious biases may be. I've worked for organizations, of course, centered around employee experience. So that includes corporate social responsibility and, how these companies show up in the communities where they live and work, as well as how employees are impacted by diversity, the lack thereof, or just being very or underrepresented in certain levels throughout the organization. So this is a subject that I'm really passionate about. I can't wait to share more with you. I did have some angst, George, about embarking on this topic because I know that you can be quite tongue-in-cheek on some of these topics, but I'm excited about it. So let's dig in.
Well, you know me, I don't pull punches, but I think that in order to ever get to the heart of a matter, you can't deal with the symptoms, you have to deal with the cause. I think I'm getting feedback on one of you guys speakers, but you have to be willing to have the uncomfortable conversation. So we're going to go ahead and pay some bills, and we'll be back right after this.
From exotic luxury vacations to dream weddings, theme parties to family reunion cruises, corporate travel to corporate team building events, Destinations and Occasions is your premier concierge travel and event planner. Take the stress out of planning and arranging your events and travel. Call us today at 510-459-7732 or visit us on the web at destinationsandoccasions.com. Destinations and Occasions, details is what we do. Have you ever said,
I'll hire an accountant when my business becomes profitable?
Are you working with an accountant that's only providing bookkeeping and tax services?
Get behind the shield.
The experts at Elite 8 Tax and Financial Services has a solution. Virtual CFO services can put your business in the black faster and help you make data-driven decisions. Boss Virtual CFO Services offers strategic planning, risk management, reporting analysis, HR financial guidance, tax planning, and much more. Schedule your consultation today at elite8financial.com or give us a call at 866-2-ELITE-8. Elite 8 Tax and Financial Services, what your business needs before it needs it.
This is Dr. Tamia Guest with Rejuvenating Chiropractic.
This is Nara Reed with Modified Nutrition Health Coach.
This is Karen Marcel with June Street Barbershop.
This is Tiffany Marcel with Marcel Luxury Realty, and you're listening to Boss Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Boss Talk Radio. It's time to get your shovel because we're about to dig deep. If you haven't shared the video, go ahead and do that. If you're a little uncomfortable about, just having honest conversations, this may not be for you. You can tune back in later and skip to the parts you want to see. So I had the most amazing self-discovery journey as I was digging into this, because if you know me, you know that whenever I'm getting into anything, I have to know. So I'm a nerd. I research, I read continuously, and more importantly, I talk to other people who can give me insight. I talk to the professionals in that particular area. And so one of the things I discovered is that the challenge, the single biggest challenge I was having with processing diversity, equity, and inclusion is that I was trying to process diversity, equity, and inclusion instead of diversity and then equity. And these are not a lump sum term. And this is why I had to go through the definitions at the top of the hour because, and I'm so gracious to Jason for enduring and indulging me because, we've gone so deep enough, and he'll take the time and, he'll go through these things with me. And he has this very unique approach. Like, first he lets me know, he relates to me like, hey, I'm a black man too, right? He's like, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And then he goes into his next part where he just real subtly introduced a thought process and make you go, never considered that thing, and if you're ready to have the conversation, it's always great because you get so much more out of that. And so then we had Erica. Not only did we dig into the he, him, his, and whatnot, we both, all of us talked about that. She also explained to me this thing about microaggressions and whatnot, and I was like, and I had to think back and recognize how many times not only had that happened to me, but how many times I inflicted it on somebody else. See, that's the part we're not going to talk about, So, welcome back to the show, Jason Lambert and Erica Firm. And so, Jason, you mentioned something in your introduction. You talked about lip service. And that was one of the things that I really wanted to get into, because I told people that, unpopular opinion, I told people that felt that the mass displays of protesting and whatnot after the George Floyd murder would not be if we did not have the pandemic and people were locked in their homes and so forth and so on. It's like people had a lot of time off. They had a lot of stuff to do. They had nothing to do. They're like, yeah, let's go, raise hell about this. And what we saw pretty much is that as soon as the world started to open up, all of that disappeared. But in the emergence of that, we saw a lot of companies really start to have this conversation. And I personally felt, nothing against any of these big corporations, but I felt like we're trying to secure our dollars right now, especially since the government's just throwing out money. Erica, you work with a lot of these companies. Did this really have a mainstream focus before then? Was the budgets and everything there? Is this really a sincere thing from a corporate standpoint?
It's interesting that you bring that up. I would say that there are some companies who invest the money as well as the time and resources into solid diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Okay. To answer your question, I have noticed that I can point it to a specific incident. Do you remember the George Floyd incident, right? Many companies had this knee-jerk response by creating these black boxes that you would see all over social media, where they had, a claim to caring about communities of color, standing with communities of color, so on and so forth. And they even, said, hey, we're going to donate several thousand, hundreds of thousands of dollars into, these efforts. Many of those were not sincere because they weren't doing the work before then. It was almost a shaming of sorts that occurred amongst companies with their corporate social responsibility, if you will. And it's like, hey, if you don't do the black box, then high potential employees, they won't care. They won't want to come to your company, especially if they're, a person of color or if they identify as LGBTQIA community members. So there's a lot of insincerity there. Many companies treat diversity, equity, and inclusion as a flavor of the month, right? It's hot right now. People care right now. So yeah, we're going to put some money, towards it. Let's, push someone who's, a person of color or what have you, before the public eye. It may be someone who isn't experienced, as, Jason said. It may be someone who hasn't even done the personal work themselves. So it can be a major PR move for many organizations. And unfortunately, it's the employees internally who suffer as a result of that. I hope that answered your question.
No, that's, Eric. Oh, go ahead.
Jason, no, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the challenges you face when you're studying this and you're delivering and then turning over these stones, in human behavior? What are some of the, for lack of better words, pushbacks that you're getting from instilling these programs, with companies or whatever? Do you find it's a budgetary issue, or is they're not really ready to do the work? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of that, of budgets. It's about fear of change. It's about fear of the unknown. Maybe not being afraid of what the results might be. For example, if they open this door for diversity, equity, inclusion programming, and not realizing that, we want to be a learning organization. You want to be an organization that if there are these issues going on in your company, that you're able to identify them and address them instead of just sweeping them under the rug. And I know one of my colleagues, Dr. Oscar Holmes, he always talks about this idea that we need to move from the business case for diversity, which is, understanding, we need diversity is important because we can leverage it for multiple perspectives, creativity, market differentiation, and all that is good. But we need to move towards this ethical case for diversity, where it's because we're doing the right thing. It's not because we wanted to impact our bottom line. And so a lot of that, like Erica mentioned, that knee-jerk reaction was due to companies got afraid, like, oh, we might be missing this out on this market share. Or this market share is going to view us a certain way if we don't address our reputation. And so it became that, like, who's going to put out the message first? But the message doesn't mean anything, no statements, if you don't do the work. And doing the work is hard. I mean, for any company, and companies they're in business to make money. And so it's understandable, not acceptable, but understandable that these organizations, oftentimes they look through this lens about, okay, what can we do the smallest amount of work to get the biggest impact, biggest return on investment. And in the short term, they might think that that'll benefit them. The long term is not, and it can actually, and it's going to backlash on their organizations because the demographics in this country are shifting, and not only in the United States but also in the workplace. Individuals are not afraid to share them whole selves at work, their identity. We're seeing the great what's it called? Not the Great Migration, the Great Resignation movement is going on, and a lot of employees of color are coming back to work after working from home for a year, and they're realizing, like, oh, these microaggressions are really, really salient to me now, because as before, when I may have become numb to it, now I'm coming back to work after being out of this space, and I really am experiencing it. And so companies need to realize that these issues are more than just, they should do it not just to get a return on their investment or to make money, but these are real people, real employees who are showing up to work every day, and they should be in a position to create a culture, a sense of belonging at their respective companies. And so we don't see enough of that, because we still look through this lens of this business case of diversity instead of moving towards, what's the ethical ramifications behind this? Why is this important for our employees, not just for the bottom line, but for their mental health and their well-being and sense of belonging?
Before I take this very hard left turn, I want to ask this question about corporations and whatnot when it comes to this. I was reading an article in, I want to say maybe Black Enterprise, that was on this topic, and it talked about developing and or allowing focus groups or interest groups, special interest groups, and supporting that companies should support special interest groups. And I don't know how I felt about that, because I thought to myself, and I think you and I had this conversation, Jason, I thought to myself, okay, if the idea is diversity and inclusion, doesn't a special interest group, isn't that kind of counterproductive to inclusion and diversity? And it was like people feel more welcome. They kind of, that specific group of people feel more, I guess, enabled, empowered, whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, at what cost to, because, and this is where I was going with this, and we're about to go deep in this situation here. So I was trying to get this question out without actually digging in this area. But if you have a special interest group at work or whatever in the corporation, and it's designed, or in your business, and it's designed to make any specific group of people feel included, but in essence, they actually end up isolating as a group because they identify it over here, and it suggests that you have to do, say, look like this to be in this or whatever. Actually, in my opinion, kind of isolating everything. But somehow this study said that this was actually a productive thing, and it made me think this. Doesn't that look like everything outside of work? I mean, we have cultural norms that have a environmental influence to it, where it's multicultural and there's no stigmatism to it. But by far and large, all across America, urban is urban, country is country, suburbs is suburb, and they have a very particular look to them when you talk about them as a whole. And when you see people out in their social groups, when you eliminate business from the equation, oftentimes people are just around what looks and feels like them, what makes them comfortable. So it made me think this. Where should this begin? Why aren't we teaching this in school? And then I thought about this part of it. I know I'm going long and deep on this, but I thought about this part of it because I was blessed last weekend to see the most beautiful thing. It was some 6-year-olds playing. If you ever watch 5 and 6-year-olds play, it is the most amazing thing because they're oblivious to any type of cultural influences whatsoever. They just, you're my age, or, we're kids, let's play, with no other. And so I started to think about that, like, well, where does the separation start? And I thought about, okay, well, we start teaching this American history thing somewhere around the 3rd grade, real passive or whatever. And then we kind of introduce slavery into that, and some people will say, well, you have to teach that. But in reality, it's almost taught from a position of teaching an inferiority in subjugating the separation, unconsciously. And so now people walk out. This is where parental guidance should come into play, because now people walk out of a textbook and feel a kind of way, and they're around people that feel a kind of way about it too. And so everybody takes on this persona or whatever, and they grow up. And now they have to go to work. And now we need diversity, equity, inclusion to unlearn all the stuff that was naturally just instilled in them as a child. Talk to me about this. Who wants to go first?
So when you say interest group,
go ahead.
So when you say interest groups, I'm assuming you're referring to like employee resource groups and affinity groups within organizations. Is that right?
Yes.
These groups where,
groups,
like, Black, like Black employee organization within the company, what have you. So, so there was a lot to unpack. I heard maybe 2 or 3 questions what you're saying. So I'll address the first one, talking about the special interest groups. And so, because of the fact that we have different identity groups have unique experiences, it's very important to have these employee resource groups inside of organizations. Because this is a place where, if they are in the numerical minority, which typically that's what happens, whether you are belong to the LGBTQ community or you're a racial minority or a woman, it's a safe space for you to go to be able to really be yourself, to have that sense of belonging. That's one of the first purposes of it. The second one is, when companies are really doing it properly, They're partnering with their employee resource groups as a way to learn about their employees. To serve as a liaison or conduit for information, so how they can create a better environment for all of their employees. And a step further, I think it's important for these groups to also all be at one roundtable together as well. So that as employee resource groups, affinity groups, they can share their experiences. It creates some synergy and also help, build, momentum to sustain a culture of belonging if that's one of the goals of the organization. And so, different from outside of the company, like you said, when they go back maybe to their respective neighborhoods or home, they're possibly in neighborhoods where everyone looks like themselves. That's an even more reason why we need these groups inside of the organizations too, to create that sense of belonging, and so that other employees can learn from one another. And it's not just about the affinity groups over here and then just white employees. Black and the Latinx affinity groups should learn from the LGBTQ affinity groups and vice versa. So there's always this exchange of information so that they're able to expose themselves, educate themselves, to build empathy. There's some models that look at these 4 E's. I think Mary Frances Winters talks about it. Bernardo Friedman, these 4 E's: experience, exposure, education, and empathy. So you can build cultural competency, and employees will then be able to have that. Now, when we talk about in the school system, I totally agree that everyone should start learning about diversity, equity, inclusion, valuing people's differences from a very young age. And it's true that as kids, when you're young, you don't really see these differences. But as we grow up, we're conditioned and socialized by media, news, and our experiences to then begin to see all these differences between one another, versus being able to value those differences so that we can see the gifts that we all bring to make a better human society, right? And so there's some so it's understandable how some people might not get that. They're like, okay, but why does identity matter when we're going into these different groups, but when we want everyone to feel included and feel the same? And I could say that if we had not, in the 1600s, the racial hierarchy had been like invented and created. That's why race, people call it a social construct. Then we could say that it doesn't matter. But the reality is, once that Pandora's box was open, where this racial hierarchy was created, and people were treated differently based on this racial hierarchy, now, unfortunately, it does matter. And we can't put the spilled milk back in the bottle. And so we need to constantly mitigate through education, exposing ourselves, having new experiences. If you're Muslim, visit a synagogue. If you're Jewish, visit a church. And because then, we'll see a lot of these issues kind of mitigate themselves. But that's where it starts. It starts, when you're young, and because when you're young, these people, we grow up, and then we have these same beliefs and attitudes that have never been corrected. And so, education is one of the key ways how we can improve that.
Absolutely. And you bring up another good point, Jason. I'm sorry, you might have to press mute. I hear like some feedback. But yes, those employee resource groups, team member networks, affinity groups, they serve a much greater purpose than just a social call, for people who share some of the same experiences to come together. In fact, it supports inclusion in various ways, right? And that is, let's say a organization has an advisory board. Typically, that advisory board would be comprised of individuals who represent each one of those affinity groups, where they can advocate for things that are important to that particular group that it's missing in the organization. So there's tons of value there. And then also, it's a space for allies or potential allies to learn about those various subgroups to further support a dynamic culture within an organization. So it serves as so much more, both internally and externally, even in how you show up in the community. When you think about what community groups the company may want to support, I've worked for companies, and I won't name any of them, where, prior to the inception of employee resource groups, they only gave to organizations that aligned with what their board members were interested in. However, on the flip side of that, their employee demographic looked totally different. Okay. The communities that their products served were in underserved communities, typically, right? So, it's not, supporting, I don't know, let's say like someone's private school fundraiser there. It could be, something that's, more so. So when employees work for an organization that supports those, not just interests, but needs as well, then it makes the employer more attractive to other diverse talent as well. It's been my experience that many companies feel that they've arrived because they have a very diverse workforce. Say, oh, well, we have 80% African Americans in the call center. You know what? We have a Latina woman who's in the executive suite. There's, and it's almost like a badge of honor of sorts, right? Jason, you've probably seen this as well. But, the mark is missing when it comes to inclusion. And so those affinity groups serve as ways to be more inclusive, throughout that. Even with when you talk about talent acquisition and the interview process, right? Tons of unconscious biases exist there. But just imagine, as I'll say a person of color, showing up to an interview, and it's a panel. That entire panel is comprised of, we'll say, Caucasian males between the ages of 50, well, 50 is a bit generous. So we'll say 40 to 65 or so, right? Imagine, as an African-American woman, would I feel that that's a place where I belong? Probably not, right? If I go to the company's website and I see that, oh goodness, there are like literally no women in the executive suite, okay? Then you go down, another level below that. I'm on LinkedIn and I see that, all of the company's directors, are male. Do I feel that I can advance in this organization? Because literally there's no one who looks like me. There's no one who even has my background at this organization, right? So there's this, and I hate to use the term glass ceiling, but I'm going to use it right now to really illustrate that. So employee resource groups essentially help break down those barriers through education, allyship, and participation and inclusion beyond that.
So you guys are really delivering on this thing, is everything that I promised. And so now that we've kind of cleared that first layer, we just set the shovel aside and we're going to go ahead and get this bobcat and dig a little deeper on this thing. So I said we were going to have the uncomfortable conversation. And I heard someone say, and I must say I took it as an ignorant statement when it was made, but I have to also be honest and say, if I had heard that statement just 4 or 5 months ago, I probably would have agreed with it because I didn't know what I know now. The statement was that DEI is a way to dilute civil rights and water it down and promote it for other groups. It's like, that's not what that is. And so we got into a debate about this thing. And I was like, well, the first thing you have to understand is that it's not about race, but of course, that conversation led to, well, we're still being killed by police in the street or whatever. It's like, yeah, but we're still being killed by each other in the street too. So, let's keep a little balance on this situation. They say, well, there's no such thing as black on black crime. That's about proximity. I was like, well, I'm not going to debate that, but it still exists that we're killing each other in the street. So, are we going to have DEI training for cops and not for ourselves? Again, let's go back to middle school and maybe we can insert this thing in here and really make an impact or whatever. But getting into these things about microaggressions, or really, to me, just people being as polite as they know how, is like when you see it, it's so much more deeper than that. That was just what they were comfortable displaying because they didn't even realize they were displaying it. So for myself, when I worked in a corporate situation, to Erica's point, there very much was a glass ceiling. It was funny because I stayed with the company a long time because I identified this chain that looked like nothing but opportunity for me. What I didn't know was that despite a lot of people looking like me, our character was different. They knew how to be quiet. They knew how to go along to get along. And unfortunately, my father just didn't raise me that way. So I didn't understand the political landscape. I didn't understand the go along to get along. My objective was to get results. This is why you hired me. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm taking and developing teams, and we're knocking these, goals down or whatever. And they were in kind of a confused space because they wanted to be able to get more out of me and bring me into more things, but I wouldn't not be honest, or I wouldn't not talk when it wasn't popular. So there was this bit of this glass ceiling here, and I've sat in a room with other mid-level managers or whatever and watched some of the most ridiculous butt kissing or whatever, and they would get upset with me again because if the question ever came around to me, I'm just going to give you what it is. And what I found looking back on it, once I started to learn about more about this topic, what I found looking back on it is I was actually getting microaggressions from the people that looked like me, not the ones across the room, because they were upset, like, you can't talk mess like that. But going back to the top of the hour when we were talking about a lot of times African Americans or people of color are selected for these roles even without the proper training or knowledge. Is it, in addition to image and quota, picking someone they think will go along to get along, be silent, play the role, just sit here and look pretty, and kind of thing, versus being a real voice? Because that's why I was honored when I was called, because I was like, hey, you sure? And they were like, yeah, you don't pull punches, that's why we want you. So what do you think that reason is? Is it really just a seat filler? Are we really trying to accomplish something?
Yeah, George, in short, it could be either of those two things and several things in between those two things. It is a fact from my lens that there are particular skills that are required to successfully navigate corporate America. Okay. And those skills sometimes, or some of those skills have a negative connotation, particularly the ones that you mentioned, like speaking when you're spoken to, those kind of things. But they're, more complex, developed skills that are needed in that, right? So, something as simple as public speaking. Do you maintain eye contact with someone? When you understand something about, a different group, are you able to carry on a conversation, with someone who doesn't look like you, who, has a different religious background, for example? Can you navigate in those spaces? Because it takes more than just being quiet, sitting down, not seeking promotions until someone calls upon you. That's ridiculous in my opinion. But needless to say, there are some skills that I think it's important to hone in on and character traits that you see in people who are successfully navigating in organizations without regard to color or any of their protected classes, right? So it's a lot more. There are organizations who they welcome, just like the one that you said that you were working with and you were called to be a part of their advisory team, because they needed that diversity of thought on their advisory board. Okay, so it's also important that as we're talking about diversity, it's more than the protected classes. It's the diversity of thought, diversity of background. What unique perspective do you bring to the conversation to help move the needle forward, whatever that needle might be? I could talk about this forever, but I'm gonna turn it over to Jason on this because it looks like you're itching to say something here too.
No, I mean, you really covered a lot of it, and I appreciate that because George knows I'm really introverted by heart. I don't know how we gelled, we connected, and that first conversation we had was a long time. Before I address the question, I do want to say that I love the idea that you mentioned that George, you would have answered that question differently 5 to 6 months ago. I think that's very key because all of us are learning. Understanding DEI is a lifelong learning process. We all have blind spots, and we all have bias. And so we always have to check our bias. And also, kind of maybe going back, maybe it's off topic, but going back to the special interest groups, those also help us to have allies so they can check us on our bias. So that if when we make mistakes, they can correct us on those mistakes. And and also proactively prevent us from making these mistakes. Because, like you say, when we leave work, oftentimes we go back to our own bubble. People look like us. There's different belief patterns and cultural identities that are similar to ours and how we were raised. And so all those things are important for us to really consider when we're talking about these groups and talking about how do we leverage diversity, equity, inclusion as well. So you mentioned something about microaggressions too. And so, sometimes people think that microaggressions are people just being rude, right? But it's more to it than that. It's like a death by 1,000 cuts or 1,000 mosquito bites. And one time it's like, oh, ow, okay, I'm good. But if you're getting bitten by 1,000 mosquitoes, it becomes a problem. And, that can affect mental health. And there's some studies that show that it actually could be more detrimental than overt racism and discrimination because of the fact that microaggressions are subtle, sometimes invisible, sometimes the perpetrators don't even know that they've exhibited a microaggression. So if you're the recipient of that, it can make you kind of go crazy. Like, did they mean this or did they mean that? And that's why it has even more, it can have a detrimental mental health effects compared to overt racism that we see. But as leaders, and this goes back to why another reason why companies sometimes don't embark on these DEI programs, they don't feel equipped. Like if you're a leader, what happens if someone touches someone's hair without asking? Or what happens if there's a man speak occurs? A woman has a great idea, no one listens, the man says it, now it's acknowledged, and now we're having this conversation about it. Leaders need to use micro inclusions, right? To say, hey, Bob, that was great. I like how you just said what Erica said, or like how you touched on what Erica just said. Anyone else have some ideas so we can expand Erica's thoughts, right? So then redirect it from him back to the source of the idea. And so, but leaders, if they don't get this training, then what happens is they stay paralyzed. And so it goes back to, I think what this theme is, whether it's from grade school to adulthood and college and in the workforce, education is really key. And it's everywhere. Like you were said, I Googled it, know these terms. We need to get out of our comfort zone and seek out that education.
Yes, and I want people to think about right now, if you're a business owner, consider what your workforce looks like, consider what your consumer looks like, and ask yourself, are there any biases that you may have that are showing through, even though you don't recognize them, that might be the barrier between where you are in business in that very next level may be the barrier to that next connection that can get you to the next level. We're going to pay some bills and we'll be back right after this.
Taking payments from today's different platforms makes it harder to manage your business. Dealing with varying fees, reporting, and deposit times not only impacts your cash flow, it makes reconciliation a nightmare. Besides, all the payments are still tied to a debit or credit card. Elite 8 Tax and Financial Services provides your business with payment solutions that make reporting simple. You can manage inventory, host shopping carts, take POS payments, ACH payments, send invoices, and so much more. Most businesses save over $2,500 a year in processing fees, a real impact on your bottom line. To learn more and get customized payment solutions, visit elite8financial.com or give us a call at 866-2ELITE8. Get behind the shield.
She cute. Style, comfort, and confidence. Shop with the trend in mind. She cute. Get the latest styles in outerwear, tops, jumpsuits, hats, and accessories. She cute. Shop from the comfort of your own home with confidence and quality products, hassle-free exchange, and free shipping over $65. She cute. Visit us online at SheCuteBoutique.com to shop our new fall collection.
Y'all ready for the next level? So here we go. So
let's go.
Shout out to my coach, Tawana Ross. She's worked with me on the LinkedIn level. Now, I was one of those people that always thought LinkedIn was just for getting a job, so I didn't use it as the social media tool that it really was. And I saw a lot of colleagues getting, some real business there. And so I couldn't really figure it out. I hired her. We started to do some work or whatever. And then I started to notice this theme going on, behind certain people I would follow or whatever. It was the he, him, his, etc. And I was like feeling like left out Lamont, like, what the hell is this? What am I missing out on or whatever? And so one of the things you have to know about me, I will tell you, I don't know what I don't know. What I do know, we ain't going to have an argument about it. I know it, and you can't tell me otherwise. What I don't know, I will seek out, though. So, safe space. Hey, Jason, what the hell exactly is this, and what does it mean? Go ahead, Jason, and break that part down, because somebody in the audience does not know this. They may not be on LinkedIn and they haven't experienced it yet, and they're going to get caught off guard.
Yeah. So, I remember you called me about this, and I think, safe space, you were like, is this a secret club, or, why are these pronouns behind their names? And I said, no, it's important for people to normalize sharing what their pronouns are, right? My pronouns are he, him, his. Because of the fact that we now know that, regardless of your sex at birth, that gender identity is something it's a real thing. And so when we talk about different people who have their different genders, it's a couple of reasons why it's important. First of all, it helps normalize the idea that we can have different genders, or our gender can be something that to the outside person viewing it could be perceived as different from my sex at birth. Number one. The second thing is it's an easy and immediate way, in my opinion, to bond, right? So that there aren't any mistakes, there aren't any misgendering of individuals. And because the goal is to, when we're interacting with people, whether it's at work or a society, is to really get to know these individuals without bringing up any barriers, any friction, right? And so when we normalize this idea of doing this, we're able to avoid some of these uncomfortable conversations, uncomfortable interactions when we're meeting different people. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, when we look at people who also, individuals who are non-binary, where, it's not either he, him, his, or she, her, their pronouns such as individuals who go by they, who go by z, zim, zer, to really emphasize this idea that this gender is a construct similar to race. This idea that we've imposed upon society to think that we have to behave a certain way, look a certain way, or talk a certain way, when that's not really the case and shouldn't be. So, and I really, I think I answered your question, but
so I also in around that same time, maybe a couple of weeks later, because Jason and I, when we talked about that, I shared an experience I had with him that was just this challenge I could not master. And this was way before, this was the thing. We're talking about 17, 18 years ago that I experienced this situation where someone that identified as a male but was actually a female, but because they dressed and carried themselves as a male when I first met them, I was so confused because, and the thing was everybody standing in this group, in this conversation, if you know me, I'm a complete introvert until I'm not. So this was one of those not situations. And I must have been corrected 6 times, but I couldn't process it because my eyes saw a guy, but she wanted to be referred to as a woman. And she actually was a woman, but she dressed like a guy. Fate was better than mine. I couldn't process it. So I was talking to Erica about this. And I was like, hey, so, in a social setting, because this was a corporate setting, that was a social setting. And I just tried to run it by her. And she was like, yeah, George, you just overthought the whole situation. She was like, you were in your, she said this without saying it, that I was in my toxic masculinity space or whatever, because I was in my mind competing with what I thought was a guy for the attention of a certain woman there. And in my mind, this was a guy, and like 5'8", 5'7", 5'8". I'm 6'4". I'm like, I'm trying to pull out all of my, player vibes on this situation. Meanwhile, offending everybody within 10 feet because I could not process this or whatever. And so I was talking to Erica about this as well. And what both of you ironically told me was that it's okay to just, first and foremost, it's okay to ask, because I thought asking would be offensive. And you got both of y'all were like, yeah, no, it's better to ask or whatever. I was like, huh, interesting. And this was also initially a hard position that I took when I first talked to Jason. I forget the slick way that Erica, she has this thing she does where she takes you out of your shoes and puts you in a tight-fitting, shoe. And you're like, it's not comfortable, but you're still walking. And so, yes. I had this hard position that I felt that after being on this earth for 47 years, it's not incumbent upon me to unlearn what I've known for 47 years and try to process something else for the comfort of someone else, because I felt like nobody does that for me, for as, handsome as I am, as much as I dress up, for as much money as I may have, people still clutch their purse and lock the door when I'm walking past. This is just a matter of fact.
Microaggression, by the way.
Right. When I get pulled over, the hand is not on the gun. The gun is halfway released. So I'm like, none of these things are changing. Why do I have to change this point? And I forget how she made me reconsider that. And I don't know that it necessarily changed my point of view, but it's not a hard stance on that. I'm like, so now I'm in this space of seeking more understanding with it or whatever. But when I was talking to Jason, it was a different conversation, because I was like, well, should include, and here's the question, should inclusion, specifically in the workplace, have limits? And this was tied to old school thought of back when, if you think of when I believe it was IBM was the standard for how to dress at work, how to look professional, no exposed tattoos, no earrings for guys, for women they didn't hang, ladies had to have a certain length and guys couldn't have a beard and da 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 da. It was like, okay, well, yeah, the workplace doesn't look like that anymore. And they found that the more they backed up off of the BS, the more productive people became. Well, especially now that people are working from home and they realize how much anxiety and mental stress they endure just sitting in traffic or dealing with traffic every day. Everybody seems to be in a more open space to try something different. So let's take this identification gender thing home. Let's really because while I'm trying to expand my mind, when I bite into an apple, it's still an apple. It may be a red apple, it may be a green apple. What the hell is not as a banana?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jason.
First of all, I want to say, kind of like what Erica said this, don't overthink it, right? There's a lot of overthinking that's going on. Second, it is okay to ask, and ask, a good way to ask is, my pronouns are, and ask, what are your pronouns, right? Third thing is, because it was a lot to unpack talking to you, George. I had to take notes.
George.
Is that, oh yeah, you want to ask yourself, why does it even really matter? Right? Everybody's so caught up into like what somebody else is supposed to be doing or who they're supposed to be. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't have an impact on, on me personally, how someone wants to be their true whole selves. Right. And then the last thing is there's current research now that even looks at, we look at our biological sex is created and developed differently from how our mind is hardwired. There's not a definite connection. I think most of us think that, okay, if someone is, say, born a male, then their brain will also be born like a male, right? But there's some research, it's kind of fuzzy out there, but it lets us know that, hey, you can be born one sex, but your gender identity is something totally different. And that's how God made us. That's how God made everyone, right? And so who am I to challenge that? Who am I to challenge that? And so for me, and what I tell people is to look at it from that perspective, through that lens, because the goal is we want to be, have a sense of harmony as human beings and not division. And so, ask yourself, why does it matter? And this is what I say to the viewers out there. And then think about the idea that, we are still understanding so much scientifically about ourselves, about human beings, about our environment, about the world, right? And so we can't let these thoughts that we're unsure of, or belief patterns that sometimes aren't grounded in any type of scientific evidence, allow us to start, differentiating people or pointing fingers at people or labeling individuals. It's like, can't we just all get along? And that's really what the moral of the story is when you break it down. It's really that simple. But as human beings, based on when we were hunters and gatherers, right? Our mind was hardwired to recognize patterns really quick. It's like 11 million bits of information are out there every day. I think something about that, about something a million bits, but we only can process a small portion of that. So the rest of that information does not get processed. And so we process information through patterns. And sometimes by doing this, we create these biases, we create these beliefs that can really harm other people. And I don't think people also understand the research and evidence of the implications of these types of thoughts that go out there, because there are people who die every day because of their gender, because of their sexual orientation. And that's not to discount the tragedies and what other like Black people and other people of color and women experience, right? Because it's not a competition. As I heard you say, someone said the DEI is taken away from the civil rights movement, right? It's not a competition. You know, we need to look at these individual circumstances and treat them for what they are, so we can help fix our society. There's even some research that looks at in companies how if we're like surveying our organization and trying to find out the attitudes and beliefs of our employees, we don't want to do it on this aggregate level and lump everyone together, because going back to, I think Erica mentioned earlier, every group has their own unique experiences. And so we need to be able to look at it through that lens as well. And I think I kind of got on the tangent there. It's kind of challenging answering your questions, George, because I'm like, okay, over here and over here.
Because you have several questions in a question.
Yeah, well, I'm used to one question. I love it though. Yeah, you're keeping me on my toes. I appreciate it. Erica,
absolutely. Please. Yes, I've been jotting notes. I learned the trick to when talking to George. You have to have your pen and paper ready. You know, you hit those, make some bullet points, and then as you're responding, make sure you hit those bullet points. So yes, absolutely. So George, you may or may not remember what I told you in the end before I hopped off the line with you in our gender or gender identity discussion, and that was, you ready for this one? Someone's gender identity has nothing to do with you. It literally has nothing to do with you. Okay. Respecting people is important, right? And continually learning about the world around you serves you in many ways and enhances your experiences. So going back to childhood, okay, we talk about, you know, our upbringing, you know, what our parents taught us, right? For example, boys play with Tonka trucks, girls play with Barbie dolls. Boys wear blue, girls wear pink or purple or whatever like color that you usually associate with that. But just as you act in business, George, you're constantly learning something. I know that you are a lifelong learner in trying to really understand taxes and business. You're probably the only person I know that is always in a continuing education class, right? Make that continuing education a part of who you are and, you know, learning and even networking with other people. Because what you'll find is when you're respectful of other people's experiences, how they identify, the world opens up to you. You could learn so much. I mean, you never know, you know, the person who could help you make your next million, okay, could be a masculine presenting transgender woman, right? But you would never know that if you have those blinders up and thinking that, you know, their gender identity or how they present is a competition against you, and it's not. Everyone has a place in the world, right? There's someone for everyone. And in every business relationship, if respect is thrown out the window, you have nothing. That's what I'm leaving you with today.
Agreed. And I think going back to, go ahead, Jason.
I was going to say, let us not forget, you know, again, that, you know, this idea of what we think is supposed to be how someone looks. I mean, there was a time when men wore heels and it was outlawed for women to wear them.
Yep.
Right. I mean, we live on this planet long enough. We're going to see so many different changes, so many ebbs and flows and what have you, because that's how we are as human beings. These are social constructs, these are ideas that we've created in our different culture. It's our culture. It's not right. It's not real. And so for us to, you know, take this as it being real and really make it tangible in a way that adversely impacts someone, that's what makes a difference. I think you said something about like tattoos and earrings and stuff too. The difference is when we're talking about these other identity groups, we're talking about things that this is how people were born. They can't change this aspect about them. And that's what makes that different from other differences in the workplace. Like Erica mentioned communication skills are very key, looking at someone in the eye, all these different types of things. But when we're talking about identity groups, gender identity, sexual orientation, race, this is this person's whole self. And so this is an attack, like really a micro insults, form of microaggression for us, and also micro invalidation. Yeah, which is another type of microaggression, to not accept the person who we're speaking with or interacting with as who they are or who they present themselves to be. So think about if that was you in those shoes, how would that make you feel? And then think about lack of opportunities missed and everything else when dealing with other people. So, that empathy goes back to that empathy is very important as well. At the end of the day, it doesn't impact you as an individual.
And that's important, like, since I've been pegged for this task force, like I said, I deliberately sought to learn because, as the term is today, I understood the assignment. So for me, it was more than about just trying to represent myself or represent how I show up or whatever, or for people that show up like me. And I think about some of what you guys said. I thought about, there was a time, my history in this matter doesn't go back as far as you guys, but literally there was a time that homosexuality was considered a mental illness. Well, this was coming from the same Rockefeller-run government that also said that cannabis was Schedule I drug and had no medical benefits. So, I don't know if you guys caught the cannabis episode last week. Go back and watch that one. But saying that to say, it's kind of like an indoctrination. And I think when we talked about the equity part earlier, when I said that's really where the work is, because it talked about the process of doing the processes. And I'm excited myself personally because I don't necessarily know that I'll be around to see it, but this next generation, like my kids, I don't know, their generation, they just kind of get it, and so I think in that group, equity, equality, all things equal can become a reality, because I think the social constructs that have existed for so long is just blowing up into smithereens every day, every time they're approached or challenged with something, because they call out everything. Like, nothing makes sense to them. Everything is just like, it's an absolute whatever. Like, if it's this, that, or the third, it just is what it is. I don't give a damn. So, I've really been learning a lot, and I'm really thankful for both of you guys for the access to you to get that information. And I hope that the audience has really benefited from it as well. And I'll leave you guys to give your closing remarks on it.
You first, Jason.
You got me. I wasn't expecting that question. Closing remarks. All I can say is I think people, a lot of people are afraid of cancel culture now, and I think people need to realize that we all make mistakes, and that's okay. What's important is that we're willing to learn from our mistakes, right, and not put up a barrier as if, oh, I didn't do anything wrong. And irrespective of our background, we all make mistakes, right? It's not just a white black thing or a straight gay thing. Case in point, and I remember I was on Facebook, at night. We're on Facebook at night. Probably had a beer or something like that. I saw this post, and it was one of those posts that, like, we used to walk 20 miles in the snow to get to school. I was a latchkey kid. Remember, you've seen these posts, right? A picture of a playground, and it's gravel on the playground. You know, like we fell off the seesaw. We really got hurt. And there were these different pictures. And there was one line in the Facebook, like text of the Facebook, that says something about this new generation are, and there was an S word, the derogatory term for a gay man. Okay. Me, my blind spot, you know, and I'm a diversity researcher. This is why I share this story, is that I'm just looking at the memes. It didn't even really pay attention to the word that was in there. It was literally like one sentence. And then I shared it, right? But this is why it's important to have allies. You know, a friend of mine and colleague called me. It was like, "Hey, Jason, do you know what you just did?" Like, so I was like, "No, what? I think you need to take that down." And I looked at it. I did not even realize, didn't even see the word there because I was so focused on the memes. Like, "Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I did walk. I was a latchkey kid and all this other stuff, right?" And so I think that, you know, one of the things we have to realize is if we are perpetrating these things, and with you, the audience, and me, myself, we really think we're good people, we need to own up to it and say, "Hey, I'm sorry. My bad. Man, I'm glad you pointed that out to me. I've learned something so we can become a better person," right? And that's okay. And I think people need to recognize that as well. We all have blind spots, and it's lifelong education and lifelong exposure to those so we can have a circle that is diverse to help us be the best person that we can be. It takes action, you know, and not a lot of words. And I think I'll close with that.
I have to apologize because you can't close. And before Erica goes, I forgot to drop this in here. And I'm going to say this so my guests don't have to or whatever, because we don't have a discussion before this, so I don't know how they feel about it or whatever. And if I offend anybody by saying this, well, you know I don't give a damn. We can talk about it later and figure out the why, but this is just a being honest part. Hot topic, the Dave Chappelle comedy recently released. I saw this show and I have a challenge figuring out why anybody's offended because of three reasons. One, he's consistent. Like, this has been who he is the whole time. Two, I believe that oftentimes we choose to be offended because a term was used or whatever, but we didn't listen to the actual message. Because if you listen to the actual message, white people have far more reason to be upset about that particular episode than any other gender group or identification group or whatever. And then lastly, well, he told this story about a friend of his that took themselves out. And that part like really hit home because they had become fast friends because they were able to get past the whole thing of gender differences or whatever the case may be and embrace each other in the place of comedy. That was their common ground. I think too often we don't spend time finding the common ground, and it's the common ground that'll take you to the higher ground. Ooh, I got to write that. That shit was sexy. Common ground will take you to the higher ground.
Yeah, I'm going to use that too. That sounds good.
Yeah, I like that one. So here's the thing. When you look at that episode, here's where I want you guys' opinion on. As it, staying in the frame of DEI and that being a necessary thing, but are we just too damn sensitive?
I'll answer that. So I haven't seen the Dave Chappelle special personally. But to answer your question, are we too sensitive? I would venture to say no, we aren't. Because oftentimes, you know, the things that, you know, we're asking of others, it's respect, it's humanity, it's consideration, and a host of many other things. Oftentimes the term sensitive or sensitivity is used to gaslight people who only want those basic human needs. cared for. So my answer is no. I don't think people are being too sensitive. Everyone has a different experience, and they see life from the lens that's before them, just as all of us do.
And I don't believe in talking for the sake of talking. Erica, you said exactly what was on my mind. I mean, I would literally just be repeating what you said. And I have not seen the episode yet either myself. I know it's been on for a while. I've been meaning to get to it, but I haven't seen the episode. But I agree. It's essentially it's like code word. People use that to gaslight people, make them feel like they're what they believe, how they've been treated wrongly is all in their head, but that's not when they really deserve that respect. So I agree totally with what Erica just said.
Well, I'm going to challenge both of you to try to get that 90 minutes in over the weekend and see if you come away with a different perspective. Because here's my thing on that when I talk about sensitive. Not liking the truth doesn't make it not true. And sometimes the truth is just funny.
But what's the truth, George?
Well, case in point, there was a time
everyone has a different truth, right? So your truth,
to some extent, let's be clear. I shot from a size 10 to a size 15 shoe. No, size 11 to a size 15 shoe in the course of 6 months. And when I went back to school, the joke was from the teachers, well, I would tell you that gauge, not your shoe size, but hell, that's older than you. You know, and I was ridiculed about my feet until I became full grown. Well, the reality is, hell, I had big feet. You know, and so when I say the truth is like, okay, some jokes I didn't really like, you know, mostly because I didn't have a comeback. Didn't change the fact that I had big feet. You had a post one day, I don't remember what it was, but I had a response to your post like, hey, aren't you like 4'11" or whatever? And you yourself was able to laugh. When I say too sensitive, are we not able to laugh at ourselves when something, I'm not talking about things that's intended for harm. You know, I mean, just literally like you're offended because this person said it, but if the person on your right hand said it, it wouldn't bother you.
Well, I almost had a joke about that, Jordan.
But Jason had something, but
who's delivering the message? Who's delivering the joke, right? And
yeah,
how I perceive that person, right? So, George, I could joke with you all day long. We joke back and forth, right? I'm not offended by it because I know that you do not mean me any harm, right? So, you know, I know what your intentions are, right? With someone else, you know, that might be a joke, but behind every I'm just kidding, there's some truth, right? That's behind that. So, you know, I may not take, you know, a joke, you know, from someone who doesn't know me, you know, in that same way, you know, someone else who's, I don't know, I'll tell you 6'5", right? And, you know, they're saying something about something that I can't control, you know, as a woman who's 4'11", you know, it's like, okay, were you trying to be hurtful? Or are you trying to like, I don't know, minimize my awesomeness because of my height? Because we all know I'm like 6'5" in the head. Right?
Yeah, you touched on it spot on. It's, I think, intention. I haven't seen the episode, but I think intention has a lot to do with it. Like, somebody could say something and it's totally perceived by me differently for one person versus another, but I know their intentions behind what they said. And let's not pretend like what we see on the surface of celebrities, like, let's not pretend like they're not really projecting what they want us to see as who they are. How many times we find out, I mean, the Me Too movement was a huge example of that. I mean, there's people out here that may not be good people, right? I mean, so I don't know these people, so, and And also, just because something is truthful doesn't always make it funny. There's certain mechanics in a joke that make it funny. Just because something is maybe shocking, awe, or different doesn't really make the joke funny. Now, I haven't seen the special. Now you really, I mean, I plan on seeing it anyway. I didn't want to get my black card revoked, so I just haven't had time. But now I really, and I've seen, and of course, I'm know what's going on in the news media and coverage about what's going on. But I like to see things for myself before I comment on them as well. Mm-hmm. So, but that's my 2 cents. Is the joke funny? I'll view it this weekend and see. I'll see if those conventions and mechanisms are in there. But intention does matter. It does matter a lot.
Right. And then also something else to think about is the impact thereof. So for someone as huge in mass media as Dave Chappelle, he has a huge following, right? So while there may be, and from what I understand, it was like a big LGBTQIA joke, right? As he's had in previous specials. But to understand that that might be funny to I don't know, the L's, right? But it's not necessarily funny to the T's. And then if there are people who are struggling with their identity or what have you, just seeing that or like hearing about it constantly every time they scroll on social media or what have you, that could have those detrimental mental health impacts that we mentioned as well. So it's the impact too. So sometimes a joke in an inbox is one thing, but you're telling a joke like on my timeline that I don't know could be highly offensive to other people. I'm going to be protective of my audience. Can
I give you a quick example? Mm-hmm. Like in the Black culture, we play the dozens. Jones is one another, right?
Yeah.
And let's say I remember a joke that maybe back in college days, folks thought it was funny. Now, maybe I don't think this is funny anymore. But this one joke comes to mind was like, like you're so black, you sweat coffee, something like that, right? Terrible joke. But what if a white person said that joke, right? That changes the whole dynamic of the joke, So it goes back to that impact, who is coming from, and intention. Everyone is not in a position, and that's one thing that I've learned at Texas Women's University. We have an ally training, awesome ally training, and it's not. I'm not authorized to out a gay friend. I'm not authorized to be the expert or claim that I can know this joke is funny or this joke isn't, if I'm not part of the gay community, right? Just like when I said that joke, if we saw a white person telling that joke I said, people might feel a certain way about that. And so, there's a lot of dynamics at play. So I don't know if he was right or wrong with it because I haven't seen it, but I can understand. And it makes sense that a community would be offended by that, right? And this goes back to what we were saying before. Even if he thinks it wasn't, if just one person from that community thinks they're offended, I would feel obligated to say, "Oh, my bad. I didn't think of it that way. I'm sorry." Because at the end of the day, why would we want to offend anyone, right? Regardless of what we thought about the joke, if it offended somebody, it offends someone. That's just the impact, the outcome, and we need to address that.
And I get that. I'm gonna fastly disagree, and you'll see why when you see it. To speak to Erica's point, here's what's actually funny. What he was saying is actually what you guys are saying, with the exception of the part about apologizing if you offend anyone, because what he was actually saying was that, and here's what's crazy. Nobody cares that he's saying that as a comedian, I'm offended by cancel culture because you're impeding on my ability to earn a living. Nobody gives a damn. You're a celebrity. Go out there, make us laugh. Don't offend nobody in the process. Makes the job almost impossible because, let's be clear, when my feet hit the floor in the morning, somebody's offended by my greatness. You know, they don't even know I'm up yet. They just kind of feel it in their soul, like, God, no, you know. Now, my point is that somebody's watching the show for the first time and they think, this narcissistic, some of this, that, and the other here, how could he possibly say that? Well, this is like what I mean when I say overly sensitive. Like, if I don't have the right to impose on your thoughts, feelings, choice, or whatever, don't expect, and I live by this motto, do not expect what you're not willing to give. Meaning, don't expect me to walk around on eggshells to make sure I don't offend you when you yourself are, you know, just offended by my authentic self or whatever. Like, my philosophy, God gives everybody a gift. Outside of your God-given gift, I'm just better than you. You know, people go crazy. They get mad as hell when I say that. It takes the heat off of everybody else in the room, though, because now it's like, okay, he's the asshole. All of us
be the
can
villain.
get together and talk about him, you know, and nobody else needs to be offended, which is cool because at that point I'm gonna light my cigar and go outside anyway. But you see what I'm saying when I say, this is what I mean when I say oversensitive. Like, if I have to accept you in whichever that means for whoever you are, then accept me as well. You know, don't require me to show up different because you're offended by how I show up, because however you show up, like you said earlier, it doesn't matter. So however you show up, I have to accept.
But now if you're offended because they were offended, why wouldn't we say that you're extra sensitive?
Right.
Oh, no, I'm not offended at all. I'm just
Right.
saying.
Well, so I'm saying it's a free country. Anyone can say what they want, right? You know, but the reality is, though, these words have impact. That's all we're saying. And if they have impact, because it's a free country, those who are impacted by their words, they have the right to say, "Hey, speak up and say we were offended." You know, that's all it is. So then it becomes back. So now, if the people who say we're offended, for you to come back and say, what do you mean? What right do you have to say you're offended and cancel me? Now you're being too sensitive. So it's like it depends on you can't say they're sensitive and then say I'm not sensitive because I'm accusing you of being sensitive. It's a sensitivity going all around then, if that's the case.
You're absolutely right. And that's my point, is that it's almost,
that's called hypocrisy.
It's almost impossible to never offend someone. And you know what I get offended by? Like, it's very hard to offend me. The most offensive thing in the world to me is an apology for something you actually meant. That bugs the hell out of me. I hate when people say or do something. Now, it's different if you say something that you later learned, like I was saying earlier. Talking to you guys, I've learned so much. I've changed some positions on some things. But there's some things where, yeah, that's just George and whatever. And if I apologize for it, you know I'm lying mine, you know, so.
But I would still recognize that apology as respect. The fact that you're willing to say you're sorry because you're acknowledging my feelings.
But I'm lying.
But I don't know you're lying. You know, but and also that, and at the same time, you really aren't lying, because why would you apologize at all unless you really did consider my feelings?
Right, and you value the relationship.
So you're not lying. There's a part of you that does have empathy about the feelings that I felt based on what you said. Otherwise, you wouldn't say you're sorry just for the sake of saying it. You know, people there could be it makes you feel better because now you feel more comfortable that the other person, that you're making the other person feel better. But at the end of the day, that's still a sign of respect. Now, there are levels to this. You know, yes, we can have an empty apology, but still, the fact that you are apologizing, I think that's a step in the right direction, because sometimes we talked about this idea: bias, lack of education. People don't know things we thought we realized months ago. Now it's different, years or months later, right? And so there's nothing wrong with the apology. And I don't know you're lying, right? But there's power in words. It has an impact.
Well, we're not talking about me specifically. I'm talking about like these celebrities.
No, I know I'm not talking about. I'm sorry, I'm using those I'm not talking about you.
I'm talking about these celebrities. They get on TV and they've said or done whatever they said or done, and it can be a decade down the line. Somebody applies pressure. They initially stand by what they say, and then they backslide and apologize because of the financial impact. To me, that's the same as the big corporations with the black box. Am I not right? No.
Yeah, I mean, but sometimes they do find education along the way. They go on their own learning journey, and every now and then you'll get a sincere apology. They say, you know what? I spent some time. What was the rapper's name? Shoot, I forgot. But he made some very controversial comments about LGBTQ community and AIDS, right? Well, what did he do? He went and spent some time, at a community organization where, there were individuals who were, experiencing, some of the side effects, of AIDS, or, had changed like their economic status, so on and so forth, to where he formulated a greater understanding, and he came back and apologized for it. And yeah, he did the work that was there. So, even if you have, to Jason's point, if you have like that blanketed, statement, I apologize, or, I'm sorry, it could be, due to impact of that, be it financial or, even a personal relationship impact with that individual that you value, enough to apologize, to hopefully disarm the situation so that you can continue dialogue moving forward, be it about that or, anything else. Because no one just apologizes just for the sake of apologizing if they don't value that person. They don't value that person or that relationship. Why? Right? Celebrities, they value their fans. Right? They do value how they're perceived. Their entire image is centered around how they're perceived and received by, their fans or sponsors or, what have you. So yeah, those apologies have impact as well.
Yeah. And even if it's due to, financial implications, burdens, anything like that, that's just like you do something wrong to your kids, you get a whooping. I mean, that's going to impact you to change your viewpoint, your perspective, to maybe take you on this journey. So, and sometimes when we talk about like those types of examples, it's really hard to tell because we don't really know all what's going on behind the scenes with celebrities and people on TV, because there's so much is going on when you pull back the curtain anyway, right? So,
So, Erica, closing thoughts.
Oh, closing. Okay. So, again, as a learning and development professional, I would encourage everyone who's listening today, be it, if you're representing yourself, if you're representing a organization, you have a business, small, medium, large, it doesn't matter. Embark upon your own learning journey. If you really want to, meet people in ways that are meaningful to them, do the work. And when I say do the work, I know that sounds like really simple because oftentimes people don't tell you how to do the work. How do you get started on something like that? Like, well, do the work. What does that mean? Do I need to just, go dig up a garden and, feed people from it, who look different from me? Okay, maybe that could be, part of your journey too. But, if you're looking to get some educational resources around it, I highly encourage you to utilize LinkedIn. Look at LinkedIn Learning. If you're a premium member, you can literally take thousands of courses about just about anything that you want to learn about. Literally type in unconscious bias training and you will see several. You can see, which ones are, considered, top or, that even relate to specific industries that are there. And I promise you, even if you take 3 of those courses, you're going to learn something different about yourself and others around you. And then, of course, hopefully Jason doesn't mind me saying this, if you want to reach out, to someone like, myself or Jason to get, a program going for your organization or, even consult about how you can embark upon this journey, not only with yourself, but also your employees as well, how you want to show up in the community, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. as well. I'll be more than happy to have that dialogue.
Thank you guys both for being here. Again, thank you for the access to you. I've been learning so much from you guys, and thank you for tolerating me too, because I know when I call y'all be like, "Oh hell, this is about to get on me," But
you're like, hold the phone, George is thinking again.
But I really appreciate you guys for your access, and I appreciate you guys for showing up here today and delivering an impactful dialogue with our audience. We will be back. No, we won't be back next week. The week following. Couple of my friends, family, and colleagues are going on a couples trip that we do, and we're going to do a late session of Boss Talk Radio because several of us are business owners, and we're going to just talk about some of the different impacts, whether it be COVID, how to get away, how to detox, all of this kind of stuff, and you'll see us in our natural setting. As such, I won't be talking as much because it'll be after 5 o'clock. So, that means we will see you guys on next week.
Boss Talk Radio, keeping it real, yeah, that's for sure. I said a Boss Talk Radio, here for your needs, we'll crack the code. He the boss, ooh, he the boss, ooh, yeah. He the boss, he's the boss, he the boss, he the boss.